being here and also being in the presence of Tom. Tom has just been so good to us over the years. And while we're thanking people, I have to also thank American Tower for generously sponsoring this morning's program. Needless to say, we have been so fortunate to have Becca Gould, American Tower's Senior Vice President of Public Affairs, serve on our board for so many years. We could not ask for a better ambassador for the New England Council. I was just joking to somebody here from American Tower, and I said, we have a picture of Becca in our office, and there's a candle in front, and we light it and say, thank you, Becca, thank you. What she has done for the New England Council, what she continues to do, I can't say enough. This morning, we're delighted to be joined by Rod Smith, the company Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, who will introduce our very special guest in just a moment. Fall has gotten off, needless to say, to a very busy start, and we have more great events in the coming weeks. We had our board meeting this past week, and I think we reported just about, 43 or 44 events in person throughout New England and in Washington, D.C., which is extraordinary. And we have not taken our foot off the gas at all. We'll be right back here next Tuesday for a breakfast with Congressman Jake Auchincloss. Also this month, we will host Capitol Hill Report programs with House Minority Whip Catherine Clark on the 17th across town, and Sheldon Whitehouse on the 23rd. In Washington, we look forward to a Capitol breakfast with Congressman Chris Pappas on October 19th. And, of course, we're counting down the days until our 2023 annual celebration on the evening of Thursday, October 26th, where we will celebrate 4 incredible New Englanders of the year. And Larry has informed me this morning we're at 192 tables. And Larry says there's room. Larry says he'll do everything he can if you're interested in 1 or 2 more tables. He will do everything possible. So to all of you who have contributed, I just want to say thank you. That's extraordinary, the amount of support that we get from the New England Council. We say it all the time. We're not that big, but we do fight above our weight, and the support we get from our members is absolutely extraordinary, and we cannot say it enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So if you're interested in more information and you want to register for the upcoming programs that I just mentioned, it's on our website, newenglandcouncil.com. But today we're delighted to welcome back a great friend of the New England Council and a tremendous advocate not only for her district but for our region and for our nation, and that is Congresswoman Lori Trahan. Now, for purposes of a very formal introduction, I'm now pleased to hand it over to Rod Smith of American Tower.
Thank you, Jim, and good morning, everyone. What a great crowd. Standing room only, exactly the way we like to see it. Maybe I'll start off here by just thanking Tom for the use of this great facility, the beautiful room and in the gorgeous building. It's clearly my honor to introduce Representative Lori Trahan this morning. At American Tower, we've worked with Lori over the years, and we found her to have an absolute unwavering commitment to the 3rd Congressional District of Massachusetts, as well as the broader New England region. So thank you for that. Before I get into the formal introduction here, let me make a couple of thank yous. So first off, I want to thank the members of the council. Certainly Friday morning coming into Boston, this is a very full room. That certainly shows the commitment that you all have to the council, which does very important work, but also to New England and to the community that we're all part of. Also, thank you to the council itself, to Jim, Larry, Emily, and the entire team for what they do day in and day out to help all of us connect in with our congressional leaders. The council is absolutely a fabulous organization. We've worked with Jim and the team for a long time. We love the relationship. We love what they do for us and the engagement that they bring to us. They are on the front end of representing businesses, academia, as well as nonprofits. And they really bring us all together so we can build strong relationships with our congressional delegations and other policymakers. So, Jim, thank you very much for everything that you do. And for those of you who are not familiar with American Tower, hopefully this won't come across like a shameless plug, but a couple of quick points. American Tower is a leading independent owner of infrastructure assets that help wireless communications operate around the globe. We have 43,000 communication towers in the U.S. We own about 230,000 communication towers around the world across 25 different countries, 5 different continents. We also have a large data center platform centered here in the U.S., and we own fiber, other assets, everything from investments in satellite and software that makes wireless communications and radio waves work, and we do that in the U.S. and around the globe. To put it simply, we own the real estate that makes your wireless devices work in the U.S. and, again, around the globe. And most importantly, we call Boston our home. So Boston and Massachusetts is where we got our start, and it certainly is our home. So introducing Representative Lori Trahan. I think you all have come to know Lori as a leader when it comes to the priority issues for the region, including her work on infrastructure, technology, competitiveness, affordable health care. She's an accomplished, dedicated, experienced, and thoughtful representative, and certainly we are fortunate to have her in Congress. So thank you very much for that. She's a member of the powerful Energy Commerce Committee, and she was recently appointed as senior whip, a critical member of the Democrat whip, Catherine Clark's team. She was also recently appointed as the New England representative to the Regional Leadership Council. She effectively uses her platform to pass legislation that improves the lives of families and delivers federal funding for local infrastructure projects, including recently secured $21 million of funding supporting bridge projects in her hometown of Lowell, which I grew up right next to in Boxford, very familiar with it and love the area. The Congresswoman also helped set a forward-looking agenda for the entire country through her role on the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. So, Congresswoman Trahan, we are grateful for your service and thank you for taking the time this morning to update us on key developments of the 118th Congress. So please join me in welcoming Representative Lori Trahan.
We want to thank the Congresswoman not only for being here, but always being available to the New England Council. Our members will always say, I went to Washington, I tried to visit the Congresswoman, and she made herself available. So we just want to say thank you for all that you do. Needless to say, we have to begin by saying, what the hell happened this past week? Okay? And
it's a little bit of a build-up.
Yeah.
So first, I want to thank you for having me.
Yep.
Jim, American Tower, Becca, Rod, thank you so much. Larry, thank you for changing the time. I hope it's a popular move.
Well, obviously, look at the crowd.
I mean,
the crowd agrees.
We could survey
the time
everyone
was
later. But what it did do for me, in a time of great uncertainty around my calendar, I'm leaving on Tuesday, and I don't know when I'm coming back,
right. But
it just gave me one more morning with my 9 and 13-year-old daughters before they embarked on school. So thank you. It was very helpful. Okay, you want to repeat the question? No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Did you see it coming? Did you see it coming?
Yes. I mean, I think we all knew that this day was coming. That's what happens when you weaken the speaker role, which Kevin did. Right when he took. That's actually how he ascended to speaker, was by making all these backroom deals, and certainly the rules package that he passed through the Republican conference put him on a glide path to the moment that we saw last week. I mean, I think there was plenty of reporting leading up to, especially after Democrats, kind of came in and saved the day again from avoiding a disastrous government shutdown, that there was going to be a motion to vacate. And look, Matt Gaetz has had that motion to vacate written for months now. In fact, he'll leave it in bathrooms so people can see it. He'll leave it on the seat of the floor. And so that has been an incredibly antagonistic personal vendetta between the two, between those two personalities. But what it doesn't do is doesn't give confidence to folks around the country that Washington can work on their behalf. I mean, I love coming home. I'm not someone who sticks around in Washington for too long. And one, I couldn't wait to get home, just to be in some rooms with sensible people who you could kind of get to agreement on. But also, this is kind of where the work is done. And people want to know that when they elect leaders, that they're going to go and they're going to be adults, and they're going to work as best they can to find common ground and advance legislation that will impact their lives. And that has virtually been on hold for this entire Congress. I don't think that the Republicans can point to anything of consequence that they've passed. Of course, when you're in the majority, you will pass a few of your messaging bills, but nothing that is even a platform for negotiation with the Senate to get to the president's desk. And that catches up with you. In terms of McCarthy and what happened this week, he has proven himself to be an untrustworthy person. I think definitely we had a lot of family-style conversations in our Democratic caucus to see if there was any appetite for, entertaining different scenarios. But if you go back to January 6th and him coming to the floor, as we all did, condemning the attacks and then backpedaling all that after a trip to Mar-a-Lago and defending Donald Trump and election denialism, all the way to the debt ceiling, making an agreement, coming to an agreement with the president on funding levels that were hard pills for us to swallow, but we had to do it to avoid economic disaster with our debt ceiling. You can't, like anything, like any of you, that catches up to you. And it certainly caught up with him in his own conference, but it did for Democrats as well. And we had a tough caucus meeting, but there wasn't one person who said, the right person to take us through the rest of this Congress is Kevin McCarthy. And so, there is going to be some chaos that ensues as a result. But, we've got 212 votes for our leader, Hakeem Jeffries, and we're going to be exhaustive to see if we can get a few more, because moderate Republicans right now have nowhere to go in the conference. And it's actually going to be most detrimental to them in their districts as they go home and campaign and have to defend some of the votes that they've been forced to take. And the extremism that's seeped into their conference, and not even seeped into, I think it's fair to say taken over. When you have 8 people who can bring down the majority of what people want, it's not good for our politics.
Some Democrats were offended by Speaker McCarthy's comments this past week on Face the Nation.
Yeah.
And they said
that
almost cemented.
Yes.
There's no discussion about working with him. Others were offended that he initiated the impeachment proceedings in the House, that there was just no way of negotiating at all with him.
Yeah.
So,
the groundwork was laid. I bring up January 6th and the debt ceiling because that's how far this goes back. We've been burned many, many times by Kevin McCarthy. You're right to bring up the Face the Nation interview because, look, we've got an incredible leadership team. They showed that interview, that clip, right before, we had our family discussion on what to do as we got ready for the motion to vacate. And it's a good reminder of, how he plays. Because, look, we would have shut down if not for Democrats. They didn't have the votes. They weren't close. And, the 2 days prior to us passing that clean CR, the CR that they voted on as a party was abhorrent. It was 30% cuts. Forget our domestic programs that families in Lowell and Lawrence rely on, like SNAP and WIC and fuel assistance as we head into the winter. Those were virtually wiped out. But it was draconian across the board with all this culture war baked into it. And so it really kind of shows where the anchor of the party is and what he had to kind of go through to see that fail, to get to a place where Democrats could, come in and say, hey, you all have been shutting down the government on a pretty good clip since the 90s, right? I mean, every single one that we've had, Newt Gingrich's 1995, 2013, I was sworn into office in the middle of a government shutdown caused by Republicans. 5 years later, we're doing it the same. There is not a single Democrat in our caucus that think having a government shutdown is good policy or good politics. But yet here we are again and again bringing, and there is reason for that. There are some people in the Republican conference who simply don't believe that government should be a functioning government. They want to, we've got legislation to defund our public schools, you name it. They just don't feel it's that big of a deal, and they don't consider the economic devastation that it causes and the ripple effect. So, I would say that certainly Democrats were, we all have our spin and our narratives that we push for campaign purposes, but that was a little too far in terms of not extending an olive branch and not recognizing that we put bipartisanship and country first in the middle of an impending government shutdown. And he's sticking to that line. The politics that have happened post the motion to vacate has been, retribution, revenge, pettiness. I mean, these are little things like taking away Speaker Emirata Pelosi's Capitol office, doing the same to Steny Hoyer. Now the Democrats on the Problem Solvers Caucus are being attacked, and further retribution is expected there. This is just not, they're more sort of consumed with infighting and petty politics than governing. And I think that shows. And, I only say all that to draw the clear distinction between, what Democrats have accomplished and our commitment to, just overcoming these partisan fights, this rhetoric that can just get exacerbated to put our constituents first, as opposed to this faction that they're willing to burn it to the ground.
Kevin McCarthy said the night before the chair was vacated, he said, "Bring it on." And when I heard that, I said to myself, he's got a majority whip. The whip's responsibility is to count the votes.
They're not good
so
counters.
Obviously, somebody either, lied or he really thought he had the votes to survive that day. So it's just, you just can't make it up. But having said that, do you think it's going to get worse now that we have two emerging candidates, whether it's, Majority Leader Steve Scalise or, that shy congressman from Ohio, Jim Jordan? Do you think we're in for a rough road if either one is appointed Speaker?
Well, first, I don't think either one of them has the votes to become Speaker, nor do I think that they have a path to get those votes. And I do know that there are folks sort of waiting in the wings, putting together their own shadow campaigns to come in. Who knows when that point will be after 15, 30 rounds. I do think it's going to be a rocky road for the next few weeks. I think it's notable that Brett Baier is going to host a debate for the Speaker candidates, which will also include Congressman Hearn, who's a fiscal conservative. The fact that they're going to televise that debate, I think, is incredibly, it's a risk because what will get exposed is just how extreme these candidates are going to be in their quest to rally support. I think the folks who are left kind of out of this conversation or even this race to get votes are the moderate Republicans. And so, I know it sounds delusional to say that we could have a few of them vote for Hakeem Jeffries, but you watch this debate, you watch the number of rounds that it could likely go with a candidate like Jim Jordan, failing several times. Steve Scalise doesn't have, enough support, I think, to make a run. And there will be a lot of disruption in terms of traditional thinking on this. This week will be hectic. I mean, Donald Trump is coming to the Capitol to meet with the Republican conference. And so that's not a good sign for, what they're going to try first. I think it's going to be chaotic. But, I do want to dispel this notion, even though Democrats we've stood in the gap now a couple of times to, be the adults in the room, make sure that, our economy wasn't thrown into chaos, avoid government shutdown. It really is not our responsibility to fix the Republican Party, to fix the Republican conference. This has been a long time in the making. And they almost have a couple of micro parties within their larger party, within their conference. They're going to have to sort that out. They cannot survive as a governing party with the rules package that they had before. It just gives far too much power to the most extreme members of their party. So they have a lot to contend with. And we will see how that shakes out in the weeks ahead. And hopefully what the American people see is that we are literally talking every day about the achievements that we have delivered to the American people, whether it's infrastructure, where those projects are happening all over the country, chips and science, bringing manufacturing back home to decrease the cost of goods, and finally, win in the 21st century by reasserting ourselves in microchips and semiconductors. The Inflation Reduction Act, which is already, delivering for our seniors through their health care savings and our clean energy investments. That is a party that can govern. And we want to make sure that distinction is on full display as, we head into next year.
With all the drama in the last week, 10 days, obviously the Democrats feel pretty good about, even though the election's only 13 months away, of capturing some of those seats that they lost. Alabama came out yesterday. The three-panel federal judge, ruled that there'll be a second district in Alabama made up of 51% people of color, which means it'll be pretty much a new Democratic seat in Alabama. What are you hearing? What do your friends in other parts of the country say about pickup seats?
We're going to win back the House, and we're going to win big, I believe. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that people understand what's at stake and how much better Democrats are in position to govern. Our caucus has never been as united as it is right now. And I think it comes from a place of deep understanding in terms of how fragile our democracy, could be if we don't strengthen it, if we don't return power back to the people of Alabama, for example. Speaker Pelosi used to often say, we don't just legislate, but we also litigate. And it can be frustrating to wait for those court cases to be decided, but we're seeing the rewards of those seeds being sown from years ago. And so, look, I do think where we're going to not just pick up seats in places where we've had redistricting wins, and we might lose a couple seats in North Carolina, for example, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen in New York. But I can tell you that those frontline Republicans are uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable right now because they know they're in Biden districts. They know that the agenda that the Republicans have put forward is deeply unpopular where they live. And this feeling of extremism being on the rise doesn't help Republicans in the majority of districts. So, like I said, we're not happy about the position we're in. Last week was pretty somber in terms of just having to come to terms with the fact that we don't have partners on the other side to work with. And you all know that better, because whether we're talking about, Medicare reimbursements, whether we're talking about some of the healthcare riders that we need to get into an omnibus, whether we're talking about implementation and our regulatory environment from the things that we have done, we need bipartisanship. We need partners on the other side to get that done. No one wins when Washington doesn't work, and it can be an incredibly frustrating place to have to navigate when there's a lot of, just holes that people can fall into, and they can last for a very, very long time. And so no one takes this lightly, and we're certainly not having fun. But we would not be doing our job if we did not draw the distinction between what we are capable of accomplishing and what the progress that we still have yet to build upon and deliver to the American people versus what will continue to be chaos in the Republican conference.
Congress barely avoided a government shutdown. 2
We're
weeks.
barreling toward another one. We don't have
Right.
time. Remember, that was just a 47-day extension. I don't mean to.
No.
say your
That
next
was my
question.
that was my question. Is that you avoided the shutdown, but you have until November 17th to do 12 appropriation bills. I think you've done 4.
Yeah,
You've
and then
4
go to
out of
conference.
12. The Senate hasn't done any yet, so you're going to need time for conference. And all that. Are we going to be facing either a shutdown or another CR, continuing resolution?
We should be working on a CR right now, and I'm sure that's happening right now in the Senate. Because we are wasting time. We don't know how long the speaker vote is going to last. And, the clock is ticking. I think we all feel that. We're not going to pass 8 more appropriation bills in the House, in part because we can't get things through Rules Committee, because Kevin McCarthy put 3 of his most extreme members on the Rules Committee, and they do not pass legislation that either could be bipartisan or even get their conference to vote for onto the floor. So I have no confidence that those appropriation bills will pass the House, go to conference, and then deliver a product that can pass both chambers and go to the president. So we're looking at a CR.
You announced yesterday your intent to run for co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, and I think
You guys do a lot of research.
yeah, it's,
That didn't even make
I have no life. I have no life. My favorite TV show is C-SPAN. That's sad. It's sad. There's a vacancy there because you have a colleague of yours, Dean Phillips, who stepped down this week because of his opposition to President Biden as the party's candidate for the 2024 Democratic. He feels that there should be more candidates in there. He shouldn't be just left alone. So he's just vacated that seat.
Yeah.
Tell me why you're running and what is the goal of that committee for you?
Thank you for the question. It is a bit of breaking news, but the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee is run by Joe Neguse. He is the chair of the committee. He's a congressman from Colorado. I came in with him in 2018. Other members are Veronica Escobar from Texas and Lauren Underwood from Illinois. Great members, doing a great job in terms of having a cohesive message for our entire caucus to kind of go out with each week. I am so motivated to win in 24, and I don't think I had myself running for leadership a few weeks ago, as recently as a few weeks ago. But a lot, this, I think, moment has just instilled in me that it's got to be all hands on deck. This position in particular, it really fits into the constraints of my family. I've got young kids, and so the ability for me to crisscross the country and travel to districts and red to blue districts, it's not in the cards. But I have a lot of capacity and a lot of energy, and working on this is important. I mean, one of the things that I've learned from my role on the regional leadership committee is how important it is for every single member of Congress to talk about what we've already done. It drives me nuts to see the president's numbers, because all that means is that the Invest in America agenda has not been fully understood by the American people. Now, you don't catch me on CNN or MSNBC like every week or on the weekends, but I work my local press really hard. I want to make sure that my local newspapers, even local media the TV stations here, I want them to know that the reason why the Rook Bridge is being replaced in Lowell after 40 years of that being a temporary bridge and a very scary bridge to cross over is because of Joe Biden, right? That bridge would not be replaced without the bipartisan infrastructure law. I want to make sure that people know that what's going to happen at UMass Lowell as a result of Massachusetts winning this Microelectronics Commons DoD grant is because of the CHIPS and Science Act, right? Because of the investment that we're making in R&D and STEM education and workforce development. There are a million stories to tell, but we need every member of the Democratic caucus talking about that, how it's impacting their communities, their seniors, their veterans, their schools, you name it. And I really do think that I can add value as a co-chair. So I'm excited. It's a little nerve-wracking and a little daunting to run caucus-wide. I haven't done it yet. But it's been, the conversations have been great so far. And as you know, it'll just add to the value and the power of the New England delegation. We've got incredible leaders at the top, and doing my share is something I look forward to.
Being on the Regional Leadership Council, you're really, I believe, charged in keeping tabs on the implementation of the science, the infrastructure, the CHIPS bill.
Yeah.
What grade would you give the president and his administration in selling all these wonderful achievements?
Great. We have work to do. We do have more work to do. Part of it, and I'm not being cute here, when you have this many things to tout, that can be hard. It's not like there's just, it's not like we just lowered the price of insulin and capped out-of-pocket healthcare costs for seniors at $2,000. We could run on that for a long time, right? That has real value for our seniors. But when you put together these massive packages, right, $280 billion over 10 years for CHIPS and science in terms of investment, manufacturing again in our country, bringing all that, our supply chain back to the United States, $370 billion for inflation reduction investments, right? Think of all the clean energy, wind and solar, fusion right in Fort Devens. There's so much to peel back that crisp, concise messaging can be a challenge. And I think that is really what we have to overcome. And it's not just the president's job, and it's not just these agency jobs. It's every single Democratic member, every single senator has to go out and tell this story over and over and over again. We've seen this work. We have a model of success in the Affordable Care Act. That's exactly what they did. They went back home and they talked about what it was going to mean for people so that they could get that over the line, and we have to do the same thing. So, I reserve the right to grade us, with the 24 election, but we have enough time to really, talk to folks on a community level, on a family level, in terms of what this means for them, and that works. I know it works because I see it happen in my communities. Haverhill, Lawrence, Lowell, Fitchburg, Marlboro, they're getting it. They're understanding that this did not happen by accident, that Democrats in Congress and President Biden delivered these investments that people have been waiting for a long time.
A special thank you to you for signing on as a co-sponsor of the American Innovation and R&D Competitiveness Act. That's a high priority for our members of the New England Council. We had a major lobbying day in Washington on Capitol Hill last week.
Yeah.
And we were time limited and we were unable to go to your office just to say thank you for signing on. This is an important piece of legislation that addresses the R&D immunization fix that needs to be addressed. So we say thank you to you. Now, another softball question here. You are a member of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus. You know so well the devastation that has occurred in Ukraine since Putin's invasion. From the start, I think we would all agree the United States, other NATO countries have been providing substantial military, humanitarian assistance. I think we alone, the U.S., has spent over $100 billion. And just recently, I believe the White House asked you and your colleagues for another $21 billion in emergency funding. But there is major concern now in the majority in the House, the Republicans, where it started maybe 30 or 40 members having serious reservations of giving additional funding. Now there was one vote to give just $300 million humanitarian and military equipment, and nearly 100 Republican members said no. So are we heading to a cliff where we may be in a position where we won't have the support to give additional funding to Ukraine? And just to follow up, Jim Jordan has already said, no more. I'm cutting it off.
Yeah.
Steve Scalise says, I'm open to that. And that might be used against him, for being speaker. But Jordan has made it clear, no more funding. So your thoughts, and where is this going to end?
So I'll first start by saying, 5 weeks after the invasion of Ukraine, I went to the border of Ukraine and I visited, Poland and the humanitarian effort that was happening there, in Romania and Moldova. I got an opportunity to meet with our armed forces who were doing joint exercises already in those countries, and also just see the devastation of people desperately leaving their home, not wanting to, especially in those early days. Folks were, coming to the western border of Ukraine, but didn't really want to cross over, were kind of holding there with the hopes that they could, go home. Mostly, women and children who did not want to leave, their sons, their husbands, their fathers. And when you take a trip like that, it solidifies, certain things in terms of how important it is that the United States, in concert with our allies, by the way, which I also think is something the president does not get enough credit for, rallying NATO so that we are standing by Ukraine in their defense of their sovereignty and their democracy. So, I and so many others, right? So many, of course, all Democrats, but a lot of Republicans, a majority of Republicans are for standing with Ukraine. And because they have the understanding of, if not, what's next? Poland? It's unacceptable. And the hardest part of allowing this to even be politicized or weaponized is what it does in the minds of China, thinking about Taiwan. It just weakens our resolve, our power, our ability to come together when, the issue of saving democracy and is way up here. And so I do get concerned when Jim Jordan is a candidate for speaker, because the most important thing we can do is actually just bring that bill to the floor, because it will pass. It will pass. Funding for Ukraine will pass. What we can't have is a weak speaker who will fear that they will be vacated as a result of bringing that bill to the floor, or a speaker who won't bring that bill to the floor. Now, we have tools, as you know, the discharge petition is one, and it's often brought out in times like this. And I do think that there is a successful path for a discharge petition because we don't need that many Republicans, but Republicans want to sign that discharge petition because they want to be on the record, as they were when they shut down, defunding aid to Ukraine on the House floor a couple of weeks ago. So look, this is, I'm sure right now Republicans are thinking, what can we get for future support of Ukraine? But I think that that's the wrong way to think about this. The United States has to stand strong and with Ukraine. Look, all you have to do is either go to Ukraine and talk to the folks who are like courageously fighting in defense of their country and their sovereignty. You can also just come to Lowell and talk to some of the Ukrainian refugees who are building a life there, who have fled this violence, who are staying in touch with family members, and who are relying on the United States to keep their word. And so I think that this is a dangerous part of our politics when these types of issues that are typically not just bipartisan but truly American are weaponized and politicized by extremists.
Do you think the Republicans next week will change that rule, vacate the chair from 1 to, 6, 10, but do you think they'll keep it? Or will they say, you know what, this has caused us too much havoc?
Yeah, there's already a petition on the rules to change it. So I think that there are some Republicans, probably rank and file, probably folks who, didn't want to see McCarthy leave, who are already making a petition to change those rules. I mean, the motion to vacate took several turns as we were watching, at the start of this Congress. It started at 50 members required to, and this was just in the negotiation between, Kevin McCarthy and his conference. It went to 25. It went to 10. It went to 5. It went to 1, right? That's what happened in between those 15 rounds, right? When you're watching conversations happen on the floor, that's what happened. 1 is like, it's untenable. Either party, anybody, any institution, it degrades the institution is what it does. And that's what he did. So they have to build that back. And only they have the power to do that through their rules package. But I think some folks recognize that this could just be, a persistent cycle that continues if they keep it as is.
A big issue that's emerging here in Massachusetts and other blue states, New York, Illinois, that's the influx of migrants that are arriving. You have Beacon Hill leaders, the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, pretty strong statements towards the White House.
Yeah.
Give us more relief, give us more money, ease up on the regulations. And that is being spread to the mayor of New York, the mayor of Chicago, the governor of Chicago,
yeah.
all Democrats. Pretty angry because they don't feel as though they're getting relief. And we have our governor here saying that we're reaching a breaking point. Mm-hmm. Now, I know she met with some members of the delegation yesterday. I don't know if you were part of it.
Yes.
Okay. Can you give us a little update on what the discussions were and going forward, what kind of relief can Massachusetts get?
Yeah. So I'll first say that Governor Haley, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll are literally doing the best that they can with the current resources that they have in terms of what they've inherited, right? Which is not nearly enough housing, never mind emergency housing. They don't have money that comes along with migrants who leave our border and come to states like ours. And they're calling on communities. I have 12 communities where housing nearly 800 families. That number is absolutely going to grow. There's no end that we can see. And so I echo the administration's calls to the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, on doing things like accelerating work authorization, right? We absolutely have to do that. I don't care what it opens us up to in terms of litigation. That will be 5-7 years down the road. We have to do it today. It just makes sense. Every family that I've talked to in hotels in my district, they want to get to work. They were working, 2 months ago where they lived, and they want to work here. And it's on us to make sure that they've got that ability and that they can move into permanent housing. 2, we have to have funding for non-border states that are housing migrants. And so that's sort of the backdrop of like the pressure that I think we're feeling, that we're putting on, the administration to act boldly, to act faster, to understand what is happening, not just on the border, but also in states like ours. But really, this does rest on Congress. It's not lost on me. This is decades in the making in terms of our broken immigration system. We absolutely need to secure our border. It is a crisis, and no one should think otherwise. So we must make sure that our border is secure. We also need to completely revamp our immigration system that has been outdated for years. There are bipartisan solutions to do this. And you're going to hear, and it is frustrating, this part, because I sit on the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. There's nobody more committed to coming up with pragmatic solutions, bipartisan solutions, than this caucus in Congress. And it's all written, right? There, you don't have to go searching for it. It's everything from, the detrimental sanctions that we have on countries in South America that really are the root cause to so many people coming up to our border, our financial aid and what we do for countries in the Northern Triangle, all the way to processing. We don't have nearly enough border agents at CBPP. We don't have nearly the technology that we need for interdiction of fentanyl, for patrolling and securing our border. We haven't even revisited our asylum, our work visas. I mean, it's just so broken, and everyone knows it. Now, what's frustrating is, even though there is bipartisanship, as recently as, within this past year, new legislation that is comprehensive, that does get from everything to the root cause, to our security, to humanitarian, dignity for people who are already here, and giving them pathways to citizenship and processing that respects people and their families. Republicans would rather run on this issue. They won't bring it to the floor. They just won't bring it to the floor, because they think this is a campaign winner. That fear that everybody has of, people caravans, the open border, they think that wins elections for them. And so that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with, not solving the problem of our immigration system so that folks can use it as a way to win re-election. And that really does need to break. And what gives me a bit of optimism is there is a bipartisan group of governors that are working with bipartisan legislators. We don't need many Republicans to come over. We don't. But we need Republicans from New York. And they're primed, right? They are feeling what we are feeling here in Massachusetts. We need Republicans in Colorado and Illinois to step up and say, let's just do this once and for all. We've been here before, right? Like Ted Kennedy and John McCain, they've done this. We've had the four corners agree on immigration reform. Extremists sunk it the last time that we were at this very point. So I think that there's a recognition that there's a lot of things at play right now. And I'm hoping how we emerge out of this is extremism is put on a very small raft with not a lot of air in it, and they're taken out, to sea, so that we can actually get back to, just doing the right thing, finding common ground, mending this divide that has been allowed to, grow in the Congress. Immigration reform is absolutely part of that. And I do see it as an opportunity out of all of this to finally get something done. But most immediately, I am 1,000% supportive. I was, after I left the meeting with the governor and the lieutenant governor and the Senate president and the Speaker of the House and the entire Mass delegation, there wasn't a single person missing, both senators. We all made our phone calls to the White House. We all made our phone calls to Secretary Mayorkas, continuing to put pressure, demanding that we all get in a room together to figure this out.
Who on the other side of the aisle, either on the committee or the House generally, do you have a productive working relationship with?
Yeah, I have a lot of relationships with Republicans. On the committee, I work a lot with Jay Obernolte from California. He's our resident tech expert on the Republican side. Works a lot on AI. He's one of my co-chairs on the Fusion Caucus and helped me sort of get milestone funding for companies like Commonwealth Fusion Systems, who's doing incredible work in terms of bringing fusion to commercialization. I can't even begin to tell you how game-changing that is going to be for energy production, cost effectiveness, obviously our planet. And he's been great to work with. Mike Carey from Ohio. I recently got to know him because there are online suicide forums on the internet where instead of someone going who's having suicide ideation and being greeted with help or where to get help, they're actually greeted by a group of people who will encourage you to die by suicide. They'll tell you how to do it. They'll even offer to walk you through it if you do it live on their site. I mean, it's beyond what like a parent could even think of, right? Especially when you think of like how small that window is to help your loved one between suicide ideation and actually dying by suicide, right? With some of these poisons that you can order, you can have within a day, right? You can. So when I heard about this, of course you do like, I guess, naivete can sometimes be a good thing because it just like, it compels you into action. It's like, how can this place even exist? Like, I'll just call the DOJ, they'll shut it down tomorrow. Lack authority, right? So you file legislation to give them the authority. But you also can file legislation to criminalize these types of online suicide forums. Because, we're not talking about physician-assisted suicide here. We are talking about encouragement of suicide to people who, in many cases, all they might need is help. And Mike Carey I connected him to a couple of families in his district who lost a son and a daughter. And he helped me craft that legislation. He also helped me craft legislation to get some of these poisons that only have really commercial application, but because they can be bought on some of our online retail platforms, young people can get them immediately. And they shouldn't be for sale to consumers because we know what they're used for. So that's the interesting thing about Congress. Of course, there can be disagreement on major issues, and I disagree with Mike Carey on a lot of things. But then we can go into a specific issue, one that impacts his district as much as it impacts mine, one that we just can very clearly see that it's a wrong that needs to be fixed, and we can come together and do work. And so I'm always on the hunt for people like that. I mean, I always think about my portfolio of work and where I can find partners, because I don't want to just file legislation that languishes in the docket. I want to see it passed. I want to see it move. we're pretty tireless in that regard. And so I don't, I'll work with anybody, whether it's on mental health legislation, opioid, and many of my biggest victories have been, bipartisan. And so I think you just have to always be on the hunt and always be open to working with someone else on something that, you agree with. And I think that's the office that we've created.
Another crisis that's appearing throughout New England and the country, and that is the concern everyone has about the fentanyl. You've seen it in your district how it's destroyed lives, families. We know where it's coming from, China.
Yeah.
Is there any activity in Congress to accelerate some recommendations or some proposals?
Yeah, and we take this up on our committee a fair amount. I mean, like, some of the things that we've passed, it's been, unanimous consent. It literally has been on a voice vote because that's how much we are on agreement. I mean, I'm clearly a co-sponsor and a strong supporter of the Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act because we do understand, the root of where fentanyl is coming from. But, one other thing that we're working on is a provision on strengthening our technology around interdiction. 90% of fentanyl seized happens at our ports of entry. And so, what we hear from Custom Border Patrol is they don't have the newest and the best technology to seize more, to find more, to detect more. It's funny, we have technologies right here in Massachusetts. Rapiscan in Andover, Booker in Billerica. I mean, those are just two that are close to me. There are several others that are working on cutting edge technology, and the Border Patrol agents, they want it. So we've worked hard to put those provisions to increase not just R&D, but the adoption of these technologies for our border control into the NDAA. So there's no question that it's bipartisan. It has to stop. We all see it play out in our district, and we're terrified. If you're a parent right now of doesn't even matter what age anymore, you're terrified. So I do think, I guess the one thing I will say is this doesn't seem to be one of those issues that has been, fallen into, opposing camps. It's full agreement.
You only have a few weeks left before the session ends. Is there any bipartisan piece of legislation you think could be pulled out and surprise a lot of people and get its
extension through the middle of November? And I have to believe that we are going to come together again to get that funding in an omnibus before the end of the year. I am very proud. The very first teaching community health center is the one in Lawrence in the country. And Lowell is now poised to become a teaching center, which is actually how you get more, or one way of getting more, primary care physicians, of people who look like the folks that they're serving in a community. And so I do think that they serve an invaluable role in rural districts and in districts all over the country. And so I do think that is an area that, we will kind of come together and do what needs to be done at the end of the year. There's also many other things. It's hard to kind of have a sight line past these next few weeks. But, the hope is that settles down. We hit a rhythm. There's a lot of things that we've passed out of committee that are, piling up. I think about, the Support Act, which needs to be reauthorized so that we have more community-based treatment and recovery options for people who are suffering from substance use disorder. I mean, that flew out of our committee. That needs to get to the House floor. And I think there are a lot of things, like that. So, and of course, many of you know the riders. We just need to do technical fixes or things that are about to expire. Those are typically bipartisan. Those things typically get done right at the end of the year. So I never like when the calendar gets crammed like this. And that's why, we really can't afford to lose any of these, days before the CR runs out, because we do need time to get these things done. But I am hopeful that once that settles, that there's a long list of things that we need to pass.
I mean, you may be having a victory on the cannabis banking
Yes.
bill. I mean, it's passed the House 7 times, but now the good news is it's passed the Senate committee this past week, so there may be some final movement on that piece of legislation that so many people, not just the cannabis, but the financial institutions have been advocating for a long time. Just a final question. It's really, it affects all of us again. That's inflation. And then, the Federal Reserve Bank in New York reported in August that Americans now have more than $1 trillion in credit card debt. So is there anything that Congress can do to address maybe the inflation? I mean, that's at now, I don't know, 3 to 4%. But households are really struggling. And
Yeah.
you go to the supermarket, go to the gas stations, and you hear it more than any of us. Is there anything in the pipeline that you and your colleagues can give some good news to alleviate or address the inflation issue?
Yeah, there's no question this is like, immigration, because it's hit all of our communities, is something I hear a lot about when I'm in my market basket grocery shopping. But inflation is right up there. And look, we can all point to the fact that inflation in June of 22 was 9%. Today it's 3.67, or last month it was 3.67. So we know we've made progress, but until people feel it, it's not progress, right? So many of the things that we've done and so many of the things that we have to tout is all about bringing inflation down, right? I mean, us having manufacturing and things built in the United States, moving our supply chains to the United States will bring costs down. Us being less reliant on the volatility of oil and gas and making these investments in clean energy is going to bring costs down. Certainly what we did on healthcare, giving Medicare the ability to negotiate drug prices for seniors is going to bring those costs down. But there's so much more that needs to be done. Some of the things that we worked on even last year was the high costs of shipping, getting those down. Definitely the food costs. I mean, we know our supply chains are an issue. And look, we also know that there's some good old-fashioned greed that rides along in there, right? I mean, I know coming out of COVID, watching the oil and gas companies, keep their prices artificially high, had, just a chilling effect on our economy. And that does happen in many of our industries that don't have enough competition, frankly, in them. And so, some of the things that we tried to pass and we weren't, successful getting over the line really, looked at that anti-competitive behavior. Even when I think of, the drug shortage that we're having right now, the baby formula shortage, it's Democrats that really sound the alarm and then, dive deep into how do we fix this right now? And so, of course, there's more that we can do. I think about the last election that we had, just the midterms. I had a Republican opponent, only talked about inflation. Every single congressional re-election campaign, if there was a Republican on the ticket, they talked about inflation. This Republican majority hasn't done one thing to combat inflation. They haven't put anything on the floor, unless you consider, tax breaks to oil and gas companies that they somehow believe is going to trickle to consumers, which doesn't. That, I think, is sort of the hypocrisy right now that we're dealing with, is that there isn't a concerted effort by folks who talk about inflation at every turn to actually do something about lowering those costs for families. And look, I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. I mean, maybe because I was a curious kid, I overheard way too many conversations between my mom and dad, like paying one bill and letting one go. This affects the so many families in the district I represent. And what I try to tell folks is that, there are things that we do, and some of this is long-term, right? Because that's how Congress, is, or in terms of where their levers are to bring those costs down. Some of it is holding, bad actors accountable when they do price gouge, and we have been able to call that out on our committee and, and nationally. But it's this is something that we know we just have to continue to work at. And I think that we do have good legislation, whether it's accountability legislation or, shoring up our supply chain and bringing those costs down. But I think we are going to start feeling that, the more that those investments are made.
Well, the test is over.
It's funny. I was with my 13-year-old.
Yeah.
She writes everything on index cards, and I was helping her prepare for her test this morning. And then I looked at her and I said, "You're not going to help me prepare for mine?" And she's like, "What are you going to get tested on?" And I handed the prep that my team gave me. She immediately walked away.
We went a little beyond the prep question. But you have an awful lot on your plate, but you've been recognized by your colleagues and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries to put you on an additional leadership position. So it just reflects well on you and how you're thought of by your colleagues. But it also does say about the New England delegation, again, that they do fight above their weight. And, it's a great delegation, to say the least. So all we can do is wish you continued success, get some rest before next week, and get a pair of boxing gloves just in case.
That's right. It's my Halloween costume.
When Speaker Trump emerges from the caucus. With that, if someone wants a picture with the Congresswoman, she's here.
Thank you.
That went well.